Did you know that the trade war starting in 2026 isn't just about businesses? It's directly impacting what you buy every single day. In this video, we'll break down exactly which goods are facing new tariffs, how much more you can expect to pay, and the specific steps you can take to protect your wallet. If you find this information helpful, please consider subscribing for more clear financial breakdowns like this. And let us know in the comments, what's your biggest concern about these new tariffs? All right, let's dive in. The trade war we saw between 2018 and 2020 was round one. It mostly affected business inputs. But round two, kicking off in 2025 and ramping up in 2026, is different. This time, it's directly hitting consumer prices. We're talking about new tariffs on everything from electric vehicles at a hefty 100%, to semiconductors at 50%, batteries at 25%, and consumer electronics at 15 to 30%. These are already working their way through supply chains. This video cuts through the noise and gets straight to what matters for your wallet, what's getting more expensive, by how much, and when. We'll cover groceries, electronics, vehicles, and even your investment portfolio. This is educational content, not financial advice. The trade landscape is shifting, and the second round of tariffs, beginning in 2026, differs significantly from the first. While earlier measures primarily impacted business inputs, these new tariffs are directly targeting consumer goods. New duties on Chinese electric vehicles at a steep 100% alongside 50% on semiconductors, 25% on batteries, and 15 to 30% on consumer electronics are currently working their way through supply chains. This means tangible price increases are on the horizon. Studies from institutions like the Peterson Institute for International Economics indicate that these consumer-focused tariffs translate to significant retail price hikes. Within 3 to 6 months of implementation, an estimated 60% to 80% of the tariff cost is passed on to consumers. Consider this. The average American household may see an additional $1.500 in expenses over the next year due to these price adjustments. For groceries, while food itself isn't directly tariffed, retaliatory measures on U.S. agricultural exports like soybeans and pork have altered trade flows. Furthermore, tariffs on Chinese fertilizer components are increasing domestic agricultural costs. This is projected to result in a 4% to 6% price bump for beef and pork by the third quarter of 2026. Processed snacks and small kitchen appliances like rice cookers and air fryers could see increases of 8% to 20%. The electronics sector faces direct impacts. A 15% tariff on smartphones and a 25% tariff on laptops mean anticipated price hikes of $80 to $120 for iPhones and $50 to $90 for mid-range Android devices. Even larger items like 65-inch televisions are expected to rise by $150 to $250. This presents an opportunity. Any planned electronics purchase within the next 12 months could be financially advantageous if made in the second quarter of 2026, before these tariffs are fully reflected in retail prices. Electric vehicles from China are now effectively blocked from the U.S. market due to a 100% tariff. This reduction in competitive pressure is expected to lead to a 4% to 8% increase in prices for legacy automakers' electric vehicles. The impact on auto parts with a 25% tariff is also significant, potentially adding $300 to $600 annually to the routine maintenance costs for a typical two-car household, particularly for items like tires, batteries, and brake systems. In construction, tariffs on Chinese building materials such as steel, drywall, and lighting fixtures are contributing to rising costs for new homes. Industry estimates suggest an $8,000 to $15,000 increase on the median new home price by the end of 2026. For those planning renovations involving imported finishes like cabinets or appliances, ordering these materials now could avoid an 8% to 12% cost increase by year-end. From an investment perspective, certain sectors are poised to benefit. U.S. steel producers, agricultural technology companies, and defense contractors are among those likely to see increased demand. Conversely, consumer discretionary companies heavily reliant on Chinese imports and retailers may face margin compression. A strategic, tactical adjustment of 5% to 10% toward tariff-benefiting sectors could be considered. However, it is important to remember that trade policies can be fluid and subject to change. The 2026 trade war is different. Unlike the earlier skirmishes that primarily impacted business inputs, this round directly affects consumer prices. New tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, semiconductors, batteries, and consumer electronics are already working their way through supply chains. These tariffs, which range from 15% to 100%, are not abstract economic forces. They are poised to increase the cost of everyday goods. Studies from the Federal Reserve and the Peterson Institute indicate that consumer-facing tariffs can flow through to retail prices by as much as 60% to 80% within 3 to 6 months. Even though food itself isn't directly taxed, retaliatory tariffs on American agricultural exports, like soybeans and pork, are creating ripple effects. These shifts in trade flows, combined with tariffs on imported fertilizer components, are driving up domestic agricultural costs. Consequently, consumers can anticipate a notable increase in the price of beef and pork, potentially by 4% to 6% in the third quarter of 2026. Processed foods, especially snacks that rely on imported ingredients, may see price hikes of 8% to 12%. What is a small kitchen appliance like a rice cooker or an air fryer if not a processed food enabler? These items, often manufactured in China, could become 15% to 20% more expensive. New tariffs on Chinese fertilizer components are already creating ripples in domestic farming costs. This isn't just about the fields, though. It's also impacting the small kitchen electronics found in many homes. Items like blenders and air fryers, often assembled with components sourced from China, are poised for price increases. Consider the case of air fryers. A popular model, previously priced at $120, could see a jump of 15 to 20% due to these tariffs, bringing its cost closer to $138 to $144. Similarly, blenders could experience a similar price hike. What does this mean for household budgets? It suggests that any planned upgrade or purchase of these small kitchen appliances might be best made sooner rather than later. This situation presents an opportunity to explore alternatives. For instance, instead of a Chinese-branded blender, investigating brands with a significant U.S.-based manufacturing presence or supply chain could offer more price stability. A quick search reveals several domestic brands that emphasize U.S. assembly or component sourcing, potentially mitigating the impact of these new trade policies. For example, a U.S.-based blender company might source its motors and plastics from North American suppliers, insulating its pricing from direct Chinese tariff effects. While the direct tariffs are on components, the ripple effect is undeniable. This highlights the interconnectedness of global supply chains and their tangible impact on everyday consumer goods. The next smartphone, laptop, or television is poised to become significantly more expensive. New tariffs, ranging from 15% to 30%, are directly impacting consumer electronics. While some manufacturers may absorb a portion of these costs, the reality is that consumers will likely see hundreds of dollars added to the price of these essential devices. Consider the iPhone. A 15% tariff could translate to an additional $80 to $120 on a new model. Similarly, mid-range Android phones might see their prices increase by $50 to $90. For larger purchases, a 65-inch television could face a tariff-driven price hike of $150 to $250. Even gaming consoles are not exempt, with expected increases of $60 to $100. This comes as a direct consequence of the escalating trade tensions. While earlier tariffs primarily affected business inputs, the current round, particularly the May 2026 schedule, is targeting goods consumers purchase regularly. Did anyone anticipate that the cost of entertainment and communication would become a direct battleground in this trade dispute? However, there are nuances within the electronics market. Models assembled in countries like Vietnam or India, such as the Pixel 8a or the upcoming Galaxy S25, may largely escape these new tariffs. This highlights the complex global supply chains at play and how assembly location can significantly alter the final cost. For those planning any electronics purchases within the next 12 months, Pulling those purchases forward to the second quarter of 2026, before these tariffs are fully integrated into retail prices, could offer substantial savings. If major electronics upgrades were on the horizon within the next year, now is the opportune moment to act. Moving these purchases to the second quarter of 2026 can help mitigate the full impact of impending tariffs. For instance, certain smartphone models like the Pixel 8a or the Samsung Galaxy S25 are assembled in countries like Vietnam and India, potentially allowing them to sidestep the brunt of these new duties. Consider the case of smartphones, which are facing a 15% tariff. While manufacturers like Apple have historically absorbed some of these costs through reduced profit margins, an estimated 40% has already been passed on. The full implementation of these tariffs could mean an additional $80 to $120 increase on the price of an iPhone. Similarly, mid-range Android phones might see a price hike of $50 to $90. Even larger purchases, such as a 65-inch television, could become $150 to $250 more expensive. Gaming consoles, too, are not immune, with expected price increases of $60 to $100. Did you know that a significant portion of these tariffs, between 60% and 80%, typically translates to retail prices within 3 to 6 months? This observation comes from studies by the Federal Reserve and the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Therefore, any planned electronics purchase within the next 12 months would be prudent to accelerate into the second quarter of 2026 before these price increases become fully realized. This proactive approach can lead to substantial savings on essential technology. Chinese-made electric vehicles are now effectively priced out of the U.S. market, facing a substantial 100% tariff. This significant barrier drastically reduces competition, creating an opportunity for traditional automakers. With fewer imported EVs challenging the market, legacy manufacturers are expected to increase prices on their own electric models. This shift will likely result in a 4 to 8% price bump across the board for new EVs from domestic and non-Chinese manufacturers. Consider this: before these tariffs, a Chinese EV priced at $40,000 would now effectively cost $80,000 to import and sell in the U.S. This makes it impossible for them to compete on price. As a result, the pressure on U.S. and other non-Chinese automakers to keep their EV prices low diminishes. This is a direct consequence of trade policy impacting consumer choice and cost within the automotive sector. The auto industry is not immune to these new trade policies. Specifically, a 25% tariff is now impacting replacement auto parts. This means essential components like tires, batteries, and brake systems are seeing price increases. For a typical household with 2 vehicles, this could translate to an additional $300 to $600 in annual maintenance costs. Consider this: routine maintenance is a predictable expense. But with these tariffs, that predictability comes with a higher price tag. Have these costs always been this volatile for car owners? Historically, the supply chain for these parts has been more stable, but the current trade landscape is shifting that reality. Therefore, a proactive strategy for common wear and tear items becomes a prudent financial move. Stocking up on items like tires or batteries before inventories fully reflect the tariff impact could offer significant savings. This is about anticipating future costs and taking action now to mitigate them. While many industries face economic headwinds due to new tariffs, some domestic sectors are positioned for growth. Understanding these beneficiaries can offer strategic advantages. For instance, the steel industry, crucial for manufacturing and infrastructure, often sees increased demand when import competition is curtailed. Companies like U.S. Steel X and Nucor NUE could benefit from this shift. Consider the agricultural technology sector. As retaliatory tariffs impact traditional exports, there's a growing emphasis on domestic innovation and efficiency within agriculture. This can translate into increased demand for advanced farming equipment and technologies. Defense contractors represent another area poised for potential gains. Geopolitical tensions often lead to increased defense spending, and tariffs can sometimes be a symptom of broader international friction, potentially bolstering this sector. Companies like Lockheed Martin, LMT, and RTX Corporation, RTX, are key players here. Has the landscape of global trade shifted so dramatically that domestic production in these key areas becomes a significant advantage? It's worth exploring how these shifts create opportunities. Furthermore, looking beyond direct beneficiaries, consider industries that can capitalize on supply chain realignments. For example, manufacturing hubs in Mexico and Vietnam, which can offer alternatives to Chinese production, might see increased investment and output. Exchange-traded funds, ETFs, such as the iShares MSCI Mexico ETF EWW and the VanEck Vietnam ETF VNM, offer broad exposure to these evolving markets. Companies that rely heavily on Chinese imports or operate with slim profit margins are poised to struggle in the current trade environment. Consumer discretionary stocks, particularly those in the retail sector, are likely to feel the squeeze as tariffs impact their cost of goods. Consider the implications for companies like Nike or Apple, which have seen their margins compressed as they absorb some of the tariff costs. Retailers such as Target and Walmart are also susceptible, facing potential margin compression as well. Conversely, certain sectors stand to benefit from these shifts. Companies involved in U.S. steel production, like U.S. Steel or Nucor, and those in U.S. agriculture technology may see increased demand. Defense contractors, including Lockheed Martin and RTX, could also experience a boost. Furthermore, investments in manufacturing hubs outside of China, such as Mexico or Vietnam, might prove advantageous. Exchange-traded funds focused on these regions, like the iShares MSCI Mexico ETF or the VanEck Vietnam ETF, represent a way to gain exposure. A prudent strategy involves making a small, tactical adjustment to an investment portfolio. A tilt of 5% to 10% towards these identified tariff beneficiaries could be considered. However, it's important not to overemphasize these short-term adjustments, as trade policies can be dynamic and subject to change. This approach is about smart, strategic positioning rather than a complete overhaul.